Have you ever felt tired and you didn't know why? Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, not physical, not even emotional, but a heaviness, a weight you've carried for so long, you don't even notice it anymore. You smile, you show up, you get things done, but inside, something aches, quietly, constantly. Maybe it's in your chest, maybe in your throat, maybe it doesn't even have a name. You tell yourself you're fine. You've always handled things, you've always been the strong one. But somewhere beneath that strength, a question lingers. Why do I always feel like I'm carrying more than what belongs to me? Carl Jung believed that the psyche has a way of storing everything that was once too overwhelming to face. Not just your traumas, but the unmet needs, the guilt that wasn't yours, the pain you inherited silently, from your family, from your relationships, from the world. This weight isn't always made of your own suffering. Sometimes it's the unconscious of others bleeding into you, projected, unspoken, handed off like a baton in a race you never agreed to run, and you carried it anyway. But what if that's the very thing that's been keeping you stuck? What if this silent weight, this invisible inheritance, is the reason why every time you try to move forward, something pulls you back? Maybe it's not laziness, or weakness, or failure. Maybe it's just that you've been carrying too much, for too long, and none of it was ever yours to begin with. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this when they drop. Most people think danger wears a mask, loud, aggressive, obvious. But Jung warned us, the most dangerous forces in your life aren't the ones that shout. They're the ones that whisper, not the enemy at the door, but the energy in the room. The subtle distortion in a glance, the feeling of guilt that suddenly isn't yours, but feels like it is. You've felt it before, haven't you? After a conversation that left you inexplicably drained, after being blamed for someone's outburst, as if their chaos was your responsibility. After you apologized for a pain you didn't cause just to keep the peace. This is not empathy. This is invasion. Carl Jung called it projection, the unconscious mechanism by which someone exiles their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or impulses and deposits them into someone else. And if you're sensitive, empathic, responsible, you become the perfect host. You absorb their anger, their shame, their loneliness. You become a mirror, a screen, a symbol, and eventually, you start to forget where they end and you begin. Suddenly, you're questioning yourself constantly, walking on eggshells, shrinking in spaces where you once stood tall, all because someone somewhere could not carry their own darkness and found someone who would. You. But here's the truth. Just because you've become the container for someone's unresolved pain doesn't mean you were meant to be. You were not born to be a landfill for the unconscious of others. And yet that's what so many of us become, not because we're weak, but because no one ever taught us to draw the line between compassion and psychic possession. Because when someone is drowning in their own unconscious and refuses to face it, they will cling to you, pull you under, and call it love or friendship or family, and unless you know how to see it, you'll keep sinking. Not all wounds come from cruelty. Some come dressed in perfection. The flawless friend, the ideal partner, the composed colleague, always polite, always appropriate, always fine. But something feels wrong, off, hollow. There's a silence between the words, a tension behind the smile, a kind of emotional sterility that leaves you wondering, why can't I feel them? Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. Necessary, even useful, it lets us function. It plays the role. But the danger begins when someone forgets it's a role and starts believing it's who they are. They stop being real. And in doing so, they slowly suffocate every part of themselves that is. Spontaneity becomes risky. Vulnerability becomes shameful. Authenticity becomes impossible. And you feel it. You feel the emptiness in every interaction, the absence of depth, the lack of soul. You try to connect, but your words bounce off a surface that won't crack. What's worse, they expect you to perform too. They can't tolerate your mess, your emotion, your humanness, because it reminds them of everything they've buried, everything they've pushed into the basement of the psyche, in exchange for control, recognition, applause. But here's the tragedy Jung saw. The more someone invests in their persona, the more power they give to the shadow. The parts of themselves they deny, the rage, the grief, the longing, the wildness, don't vanish. They ferment, they darken, they wait. And when the mask starts to slip, the cost is often catastrophic. Living near someone like this slowly erodes your own authenticity. You begin to shrink, filter, monitor. You start wearing your own mask, not because you want to, but because theirs won't let yours come off. Soon you're both acting, both disconnected, both starving behind smiles, and no one remembers how to be real anymore. There's a certain kind of person who seems composed, measured, rational, in control. They don't yell, they don't collapse, they don't show anger or pain, ever. They pride themselves on being balanced, virtuous, emotionally mature. But if you stay long enough, if you get too close, you'll notice something. A sudden coldness when you speak from your heart, a passive-aggressive silence, a quiet resentment that builds like a pressure cooker, and then one day it erupts. Something small, a look, a sentence, a tone of voice, and suddenly the person you thought you knew is unrecognizable, consumed by a rage, a bitterness, a violence that seems to come from nowhere. But it didn't come from nowhere, it came from the shadow. Jung described the shadow as everything we repress, deny, or disown in ourselves. Not just the bad, but also the powerful, the passionate, the wild, anything that doesn't fit the image we want others to see. When someone spends their life hiding this side of themselves, they think they're being good, noble, righteous. But repression is not transformation, it's just exile. And what we exile eventually returns. With interest, that's the paradox. The more someone tries to be good, the more dangerous they can become, because what they reject in themselves does not dissolve. It waits, and when it returns, it doesn't whisper. It screams. You've likely seen it in the parent who shames their child for crying, while quietly seething from years of buried grief. In the partner who despises any mention of weakness, because their own wounds are still bleeding beneath the surface. These are not evil people. They are fractured people. People split between who they are and who they think they're supposed to be. And when that fracture grows too wide, the psyche begins to collapse inward. If you're close to someone like this, you've felt the minefield, the dread of saying the wrong thing, the fear of their silence, the way you start policing yourself, not to be kind, but to survive. You're not in a relationship anymore. You're in a containment zone, and every day you stay, you lose a little more of yourself. Not every manipulator screams. Some preach, they quote wisdom, they invoke virtue, they say they're just trying to help. They speak of ethics, responsibility, doing the right thing. But underneath that carefully polished surface, something else is moving, darker, colder, more controlling. Carl Jung warned us, when morality becomes a weapon, it ceases to be moral. It becomes domination dressed as virtue. The moral controller is the person who has turned their unresolved shadow into a compass, but instead of pointing it inward, they aim it at you. They correct you, but never question themselves. They shame your emotions while hiding their own. They label your truth as selfish, your boundaries as cold, your independence as betrayal. And the most disturbing part? They believe they're helping. They're convinced their judgment is insight, their control is care, their guilt trips are guidance. But it's not your growth they want, it's your compliance. Because deep down, they are terrified of their own chaos. And instead of facing it, they seek to regulate yours. You've seen it in families, in religion, in relationships that feel like moral courtrooms, where everything you do is quietly measured against a standard you never agreed to. And slowly, silently, you start to shrink. You begin censoring yourself, hiding your desires, apologizing for your joy. You become someone you barely recognize, just to avoid their disappointment, or worse, their silent withdrawal. But Jung was clear. When someone uses guilt as a leash, it is not love. It is control. And here's the truth they'll never admit. They don't want you to grow. They want you to stay because your growth threatens their illusion of superiority. Your autonomy confronts their unacknowledged dependency. Your freedom exposes their fear. So they moralize your every move, not to elevate you, but to keep you within reach. And until you see it, you'll keep mistaking manipulation for mentorship. You'll keep calling control care. But the soul knows. It feels the subtle violence, the pressure to please, the unspoken demand to be less what so they can feel like more. And no one deserves to live under that weight, especially not you. Some people don't wear masks. Some people are masks. One moment they're affectionate, supportive, full of warmth. The next, cold, hostile, accusatory. And you have no idea what changed. You replay conversations in your head, wondering what you did wrong. You apologize, you explain. You try to fix the mood, smooth the edges, keep the peace. but the ground is always shifting. This is life with someone possessed by their complexes, unconscious fragments of trauma, memory, and emotion that have become so dominant, they hijack the personality itself. Carl Jung described complexes as splinter psyches, autonomous entities within the psyche, formed by painful or unresolved experiences, and when triggered, they take over. The person you're dealing with in those moments isn't fully there. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to a wound, a parent, an abandonment, a humiliation from years ago. And in their mind, you've become the symbol. You didn't cause the pain, but now you're holding it. And what makes it more dangerous is the unpredictability. You never know who's walking through the door. The person who loves you, or the person who sees you as a threat. This inconsistency creates a kind of psychological addiction. You crave the good moments. You wait for the warmth to return. You forgive the outbursts because they're not always like this. But over time, the cycle tightens. You start to adapt, to anticipate, to manage their storms before they start. You lose parts of yourself in the process because keeping the peace becomes more important than being whole. And yet, none of it works because when someone hasn't confronted their inner wounds, they become slaves to them. Their pain doesn't speak. It screams through blame, rage, withdrawal, manipulation. And you? You're the nearest object, Jung believed. That unacknowledged complexes will over time colonize the psyche. You begin to speak from them, feel from them, live from them, and in doing so, you lose the self. But here's the danger no one talks about. That kind of fragmentation is contagious. If you stay too long inside someone else's psychological chaos, it begins to infect your own. You start to doubt your memory, your intuition, your emotions. You begin to carry pain that was never yours, and soon, you don't even realize it's happening, because this isn't abuse in the traditional sense. It's confusion, emotional disorientation, a slow collapse of reality under the weight of someone else's unconscious, and unless you wake up, you'll disappear inside of it. Some people don't shout, they don't accuse, they don't explode, they need, they cling, they drain. At first it looks like care, like connection. They're vulnerable, open. They just want to be understood. And you, with your open heart, step in. You listen, you soothe, you give. You become the emotional anchor in a sea of their instability. But slowly, quietly, something shifts. They begin to expect your presence, your time, your emotional availability. And if you hesitate, if you set a boundary, if you step back, the guilt arrives, the sighs, the sadness, the passive remarks, the silence that punishes. Jung might not have called them psychic vampires, but he knew their shape. These are people whose identity has not yet solidified, who haven't formed an internal center strong enough to bear their own weight. And so, they borrow yours. They live off your empathy, your reassurance, your attention. But attention becomes obligation, empathy becomes exhaustion, and suddenly your life is no longer about your needs, it's about protecting their stability. You stop expressing your own pain because there's no room for it. You stop asking for support because they always need more. You become background to someone else's emotional survival. But survival is not love. And here's the terrifying truth Jung pointed to. In relationships like this, the line between you and the other begins to dissolve. You start to forget where you end and they begin. Their sadness becomes your sadness, their chaos your responsibility. You may think you're helping, that you're being strong, that you're holding space. But what you're really doing is being devoured, piece by piece, day by day, because this is not a relationship built on mutual recognition. It's built on unconscious fusion, a symbiotic tangle that feels like intimacy, but is actually psychic consumption. And over time you become hollow, not suddenly, slowly, invisibly. You stop dreaming, you stop growing, you stop listening to yourself, because every ounce of energy is being siphoned into someone who cannot, or will not, carry their own weight. And the most painful part, you may love them deeply, but love cannot survive where boundaries are dead, where presence is exploited, where your soul is slowly starving to keep someone else alive. Jung believed that individuation, true healing, only begins when two people can stand as separate, sovereign beings, not merged, not fused, not feeding, but whole. Until that happens, all you have is need, dressed in affection, and it will break you. So far we've looked outwards, at the manipulators, the persona bearers, the moral controllers, the fragmented, the vampires. But now we turn the mirror inward, because if Jung taught us anything, it's this: the parts of others that wound us most deeply often reflect the parts of ourselves we've yet to face. What if, without realizing it, you've also drained someone, projected onto someone, played a role so tightly, so perfectly, that you forgot who you were beneath it? What if you've asked others to carry parts of you that you could not carry alone? That's not a question meant to blame. It's meant to liberate, because until you can admit it, even whisper it, you will remain trapped in the exact same unconscious dance. Jung wrote, "What we do not make conscious we live out as fate, and that fate often comes dressed as repetition, the same kinds of relationships, the same arguments, the same patterns of self-abandonment, self-sabotage, self-erasure, again and again and again, until you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what inside me agreed to this?" That question hurts, because it means letting go of the illusion that you were only ever a victim, that you were always the one being acted upon, that you were just unlucky. No, you were participating, not because you wanted to, not because you're broken, but because something in your unconscious believed, this is what love looks like, this is how safety feels, this is what I deserve. These are the hidden contracts we sign before we can even read the fine print. Emotional agreements forged in childhood, in trauma, in silence, carried into adulthood like sacred vows we never question. But now, you can question them. Now, you can break them, because until you do, you will keep giving your life to people who don't even know how to carry their own, let alone honor yours, and the weight, it only gets heavier. But here's the shift. When you start seeing your part in the cycle, you start reclaiming your power within it. You begin the long, painful, holy process of saying, no more performing for love, no more shrinking for peace, no more carrying what isn't yours, no more becoming what others need just to feel safe. This is not selfishness, it is self-resurrection, and it begins, as all resurrections do, in the ruins. Most people think healing is about feeling better, less sadness, less anxiety, less pain. But Jung taught something radically different. Healing, he said, is not about feeling better. It's about becoming whole, and wholeness is not comfortable. Because to become whole, you don't just gather your light, you gather your darkness too. You sit with the anger you've silenced, the envy you've moralized, the grief you've intellectualized, the desire you've hidden under layers of performance and shame. You let it all come forward, not to indulge it, not to act it out, but to see it clearly, without flinching, without fixing, without lying to yourself. This is the path of individuation. It's not self-improvement. It's not becoming a better version of yourself. It's becoming who you actually are. When the masks fall, when the roles dissolve, when the noise of expectation finally goes quiet. And it begins with one moment. The decision to stop running, to stop distracting yourself, to stop outsourcing your pain, to stop clinging to identities that never belong to you. You are not the strong one because you never cry. You are not the good one because you never say no. You are not the healed one because you've learned how to smile through your suffering. You are the one who is tired, who is tender, who is filled with rage and beauty and contradiction. You are the one who is becoming, and that is more than enough. But you will lose things on this path. You'll lose relationships built on false harmony. You'll lose roles that made you feel safe but suffocated. You'll lose approval, belonging, certainty, because integration isn't about adding, it's about shedding. Shedding what isn't yours, shedding who you thought you had to be, shedding the protection that became a prison, and beneath all of that, you find your soul. Not the soul others see. The soul you've always known was there, quietly waiting for you to come home. There's a quiet power that comes when you stop being available to everyone's unconscious, when you stop absorbing, explaining, fixing, softening your truth so others feel more comfortable in your presence. You begin to stand in your center, not the center of attention, the center of yourself. There, something changes. People still project, still demand, still try to cast you in their psychic play, but it doesn't stick anymore. Because now, you know who you are, and when you know who you're no longer available to be used, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as a stand-in for someone else's unresolved pain. You don't over-explain your boundaries. You don't apologize for taking up space. You don't perform emotional labor just to be seen as kind, good, or worthy. You exist as you are fully, clearly. And that clarity, it disrupts every unconscious contract around you, because when someone can no longer manipulate you with guilt, they either evolve or they exit. When they can no longer hook into your empathy like a feeding tube, they either awaken or they retreat. You stop being a role, you start being a mirror, and people will either face what they see or run from it. But that's no longer your concern, because you are no longer living for peace that costs your soul. You are no longer holding yourself hostage to be loved. You are no longer contorting your truth to fit a script someone else wrote. You are rooted now, and rooted people are not reactive. They don't flinch at disapproval. They don't collapse when someone misunderstands. They don't sacrifice their clarity to keep someone else's illusion alive. They walk through life as a sovereign force, not forceful, but unmovable. And in that presence, people feel it. You cannot be used. You cannot be emotionally trespassed. You cannot be pulled back into roles you've outgrown because you've stopped waiting for permission to be whole. And the ones who still want the version of you that breaks to keep them comfortable, they'll call you selfish, cold, distant, but you'll know the truth. You're just free. What if the pain was never punishment? What if it wasn't a curse, but a key? Jung didn't believe your suffering was meaningless. In fact, he believed it was the very material your soul needed to become real. Because everything you've carried, the emotional weight, the confusion, the guilt, the patterns that seem to make no sense, they weren't random. They were signs, messages, maps. You just didn't know how to read them yet. The betrayal that shattered you showed you where you were still betraying yourself. The abandonment that gutted you revealed the parts of you you'd long abandoned first. The roles you played to feel loved taught you how much of your identity was shaped by fear, not truth. And underneath it all, beneath the aching, the silence, the patterns that kept repeating, was a deeper truth. You were never broken. You were buried under stories that weren't yours, under projections you inherited, under identities built on survival, not sovereignty. But now, you've begun to dig. You've faced the shadow. You've named the mask. You've watched yourself from above and below. And now something ancient in you stirs. Not the part of you that wants to be healed, the part that is ready to lead. Because when you've walked through this much fire, your presence begins to burn differently. You speak less. But when you do, your words carry weight. You give less, but what you give is clean. Not a sacrifice, not a manipulation, just presence. You love, but not to be needed. You help, but not to be consumed. And that is what power looks like when it's born from pain. It doesn't roar. It doesn't threaten, it simply is. Clear, clean, centered. And the world which once fed off your uncertainty now has no doorway left, because you've closed them all. With one sacred decision, I will no longer abandon myself for love that doesn't know how to hold me. That is the final integration, not perfection, not invincibility, but ownership of your pain, your history, your worth, your path. And now your life begins again, not from survival, but from sovereignty. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you has already shifted. Maybe not loudly, maybe not with fireworks or fanfare, but something opened, a recognition, a release, a return. Because this wasn't just a video. Not really. It was a conversation you've been trying to have with yourself for years, a conversation you were never given the language for, and now, finally, you see it. That silent weight you've carried all this time. It was never just about other people. It was about the parts of you waiting, how quietly, patiently, to be reclaimed. The part that broke and never felt safe enough to speak. The part that tried to stay small so others wouldn't feel threatened. The part that felt rage and passion and desire, but was told, don't be too much. The part that knows deeply you were never meant to live fractured, because you weren't. You were meant to live integrated, whole, awake. And hey, if you've been feeling stuck in emotional loops, struggling with inner conflict, or sensing there's a part of you you've never fully understood, you're not alone in that. This guide we've put together dives deep into exactly that. It'll help you understand why certain patterns keep repeating, face the hidden parts of yourself you've been avoiding, begin real emotional healing, and self-integration. Reconnect with your true undiluted self if any of that speaks to something you've been quietly carrying. Check the first pinned comment under this video. It might be exactly what your soul has been needing. No pressure, no rush, just when you're ready. If this video helped you in any way, leave a like and watch the video that's showing up here on the screen. It might help you even more.